The latest tech.
People love iPhone, and it's an important part of our daily lives.
Interviews.
You see far too many products that come on the market that you look at that you say, was a blind person ever even consulted for something like this?
Accessibility.
The most interesting thing over the last couple of years is the emphasis on gaming and accessibility.
This is Double Tap TV.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. I am Steven Scott.
And I am Marc and Steven, I've got to ask you what will probably seem like a fairly odd question, but I promise there is context here.
Okay. You got me worried now.
You like the lead up for that. Okay, so we're both married men, right? Some of us older than others. Some with kids, some with several animals to take place of kids.
Yes.
So I'm curious from your perspective, what was it like dating for you? Did you come up with any challenges on meeting, that perfect someone because of your vision loss?
Well, I think in early years it was a case of, I tended to date a lot of disabled people. I don't know why that happened. It just seemed to be the case. I wasn't seeking out disabled people necessarily, but I often was in those kind of circles, so I think that's where it came from. The thing is that today, of course, it's all about online dating, and I can't imagine what that's like today. But for me, it was a little bit easier because the person I ended up falling in love with properly and dating and then becoming married to was someone I went to school with. So, that made it really easy for me.
I like how you use the word properly there, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
On a good day, dating really isn't the most fun thing in the world. Some people love it. Some people actually love it. So I can imagine adding a disability to the mix, and there's a potential for a lot of issues. And, as we were planning to do this show, we put a call out on social media for people who are dating, and unsurprisingly, a lot of people want to talk openly about a lot of their experiences, but a bunch of things did come up that was in common amongst all the people that did reach out. And I wanted to bring up some of those things because it helps frame what we're going to be talking about today. And those are things like, negative stereotypes, obviously accessibility, self-esteem was a big one, communication barriers, of course, depending on the disability. There was overprotectiveness from friends and family. Unintentional ableism was one of them. But you know what the biggest thing that people said was holding them back? That was disclosure. People told me they had a hard time deciding when and how to actually disclose the fact that they had a disability to a potential partner out there because they were scared that things that might have been going well would take a turn for the worse or lead into all the other things I just mentioned.
Yeah, I think that all of that makes total sense to me. I mean, I was in a slightly fortunate position when I was younger because I was not as visually impaired as I am now, let's put it that way. So, I had a bit more vision. In my earlier years, I didn't use a white cane, so I could get around and I could almost hide my visual impairment. And it wasn't, if I'm honest, it wasn't something that even came up in my mind. It wasn't even something I would even thought about talking about. The only part of it that came up for me that would become a problem was driving, because I kept thinking, well, I wouldn't be able to drive anywhere, and if I'm with someone who wants to go places, that might be a bit of a challenge, those kind of things. But as I've gotten older, and obviously now I am married and very happily married, so quite happy to not have to think about these things now. But I think today that would be a much more of a challenge, and I do think people look at you differently. I know they do. I mean, forget dating for a second, just in life, people look at you differently when you are disabled. Like, I've just come back from a trip from Vienna, from Europe, and in that trip I had I don't know 5 or 6 instances I could call on, which were unintentional ableism. People screaming in my face, asking, "Can I hear them?" Explaining to them, "I'm not deaf, I'm blind." Having people ask if I can walk okay when I'm standing in front of them. All these kind of things happen. So if people see you as less, it makes it very hard to turn that into something that you can imagine, like approaching someone at a bar and saying hello. And when you think about online dating, well, if you can swipe right, if you see a wheelchair and you're an ableist type of person, you'll just swipe on and you'll never give that person a chance.
And there are plenty of dating apps out there and services for what we call the mainstream. Things like Plenty of Fish, Match.com. And Stephen, there's even some sites that try and cater to people with disabilities. I did a quick search online and you find sites like disabledmate.com, disabilitydating.net, and even dating for, like the number 4, disabled.com. But there's definitely few and far between that cater to the actual community.
Yeah, and of course you have accessibility in there as well. So So for blind people, for example, how many of these sites will be accessible? Now, we hope that the disability-specific ones are. But, look, I have to be honest with you, Mark. It's not. I didn't seek out to date disabled people, but if I decided I didn't want to date someone who's disabled, I kind of have that choice as well, right? I mean, you can argue the toss about whether that's right or wrong, but, if I decide, do you know what, I don't want to live in this world of disability, I want to be with someone who isn't disabled, or at least, open the net, or you could cast the net wider. Yeah, and, I might want to go into Plenty of Fish, but is that site accessible? And that can be a challenge too.
Stephen, thanks to another show here on AMI, The Pulse with Joeita Gupta, I was introduced to the founders of a really cool new app called Dateability. And that app was created from the ground up to obviously fill this niche and fill this gap. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, though, I want to introduce you to the founders of this new app and see what they've got up their sleeve. Stick around.
You're watching Double Tap TV. Get involved. Follow us at Double Tap On Air or email us feedback@doubletaponair.com. Double Tap TV will be right back. You're watching Double Tap TV.
Our guests this week are the co-creators of an app called Dateability, which is available now on the Apple App Store and Google Play Store, and of course at dateabilityapp.com. Now, Dateability is a first of its kind, an app designed specifically for the disabled and chronically ill community. So I'm happy to welcome the founders of this app, Alexa and Jacqueline Child, to the show. Welcome to Double Tap TV. Please tell me, or tell our audience, of course, where did this idea come from in the first place for Dateability? Jacqueline?
This idea for Dateability came from my horrible experiences dating on mainstream dating apps. As a disabled and chronically ill woman, I would match with people, sometimes disclose my disability right away, sometimes I would wait, but in the end, I was always met with rejection and even really ableist comments.
Now, you talked about some pretty negative experiences with other apps out there, and we know you suffer from a chronic illness. What was the turning point that made you put your heel in the ground and basically say, we've got to change this?
Yeah, actually, it was, so in October of 2021, Jacqueline made the decision to get a feeding tube placed in her abdomen. That was a long decision that she had been putting off, but with the advice of her doctors, it was best for her and her long-term health. And at that moment, I kind of panicked. She panicked because in Colorado, everything's very active. A lot of dates revolve around some kind of physical activity, and that's usually off the table for Jacqueline. And so they would go get dinner or drinks or coffee, something like that. And with a feeding tube, those dates are also different now and kind of off the table as well, or they just look different. And I kind of freaked out for her as to how able-bodied people would respond to that, that she has a feeding tube, she gets her nutrients through a formula at night while she sleeps, eating causes vomiting shortly after, et cetera, et cetera. And it was at that time that I said, let's do this ourselves.
So you went through the process of developing an app during a global pandemic, I might add. Did the fact that we are in a pandemic and behaviors are changing, did any of that come into play at all?
Yeah, we actually thought that it's unfortunate that the pandemic happened and is happening, but at the same time, we think that it was the right time. There was a lot more conversation about accessibility, about people who are immunocompromised, disabled, high risk with regard to COVID. So there was just more attention brought to it. Unfortunately, we've seen the way the majority of the world still treats those people, but there's more awareness. There are people who have long COVID who are now dealing with a whole new reality, and who would probably find great companionship on Dateability. And then at the same time, with the pandemic, people, I think, finally realize that dating apps are the future. Going out to bars and meeting somebody organically is less likely to happen because we're all taking these precautions. And that people are also more open to digital relationships and companionship because, especially for a higher risk population, people are at home trying to be safe. We experience that. We are both still very much isolated from a lot of other normal activities, pre-pandemic activities. And so we're open to having that companionship virtually. And I think we're not alone in that.
I loved how you used air quotes when you said the word normal, Alexa. Talk to me a bit about designing an app or actually developing an app from the ground up. Did you actually learn how to code yourselves, Jacqueline?
We designed the app and every icon aspect page of the app ourselves. So we literally put pen to paper, got a notebook and drew out what the pages would look like. Then I took those and I drew the icons and then photoshopped things to look roughly like a dating app. And then we were able to find a developer and send them to them, and they put it into an application called Figma, which is a great design application, and they just made it that it really looks like and acts like an app, and they built it from there. And so we really, it was from conception solely based on us, and then an incredible tech team who built it.
Well, I hope you keep that notebook, kind of like that first dollar in a business, right?
Yeah, you think so. Jacqueline, Alexa, we need to take a quick break. Stick around. When we come back, I want to talk about designing for accessibility and really the importance, especially in an app like Dateability. It is Double Tap TV. We'll be right back.
Can't get enough Double Tap TV? Subscribe to the podcast and get your fill of Double Tap every day. Visit doubletaponair.com and follow us now. Double Tap TV will be right back. You're watching Double Tap TV.
We're back talking with Alexa and Jacqueline Child, the co-creators of the app Dateability, which is designed for the disabled and chronically ill communities. Now, Jacqueline and Alexa, we talked obviously about designing for accessibility, and while our show does focus on low vision, there are so many types of disabilities out there. How do you even start? Where do you even go about trying to make sure that you're serving everybody that you possibly can? I know it's going to evolve over time, but how do you ensure that you get your mind around all the different design philosophies that need to go into designing for accessibility?
That was the most nerve-wracking part of designing it because, like you said, it's like I can speak for myself and my abilities. I cannot speak for anyone else. And there's such a range that, at some point you have to accept that you probably won't ever be able to accommodate every single person. But we want to accommodate the majority. And so with collaboration with our tech team, we were figuring out the best way to do things. So for your feed and the people who show up, you can either swipe or you can press a button, and we think that's really important to have both. Obviously, we are like screen reader compliant and ADA compliant, and we're really always looking for ways to be more accessible. We love the feedback, and unfortunately, accessibility costs money to do, and so it's a bummer that it has to be so expensive to make something accessible for so many people. But any feedback that we get, we try to implement, and we actually haven't really received any criticism about the app's accessibility.
In addition to having the app on smartphones, we have a web app version. And that makes us different from all the other mainstream dating apps that you can go on to dateabilityapp.com, and it's pretty much exactly the same as the smartphone app. And that allows, it makes it more accessible for our users. And we thought that was really important. And that's something that, not many apps, besides Match.com and those older apps, all the new apps are usually just smartphone capable.
Were there any features that you used on other dating apps that you knew you had to copy or do better than?
We liked the option of having a swipe and a button option to either like or dislike someone. And we, there's a couple things, we wanted it to make sure that you can select like multiple preferences and your sexual orientation. So if you're interested in both non-binary and women, you can choose both. And so we wanted to make it accessible that way. I think the apps, from my experience alone, have done a pretty good job at being accessible. But the web application was the biggest thing that we really wanted to include, because we know that so many people just prefer their desktop, and desktops typically have more accessibility capabilities.
And in addition, our app has a profile section called Dateability Deets. And this is why we believe that the mainstream dating apps would never really be able to do what we're doing, because it just won't work for a number of reasons. But Dateability Deets is an extensive list of broad terms used to describe one's situation. So immunocompromised or wheelchair user, food allergy, no diagnoses. It is completely optional. We want everyone to feel comfortable, but it goes on your profile under basic information just as a neutral fact. We want to destigmatize disability and chronic illness. And it also will help reduce the anxiety one may feel when having to disclose, what they're going through or what their capabilities are, limitations. It's just out there, normal, in a safe, judgment-free place.
Talk to us about the user base and the feedback that you get. I mean, obviously you have to start somewhere, right?
The feedback's been great. People are really excited to learn about it. Almost everyone says, I've been looking for something like this. It's so needed. And we feel like we have a really solid user base. We're over 2,500 users. Our location setting is turned off, which, some people like, but some people don't. But we feel like it's the best decision for our user base because, like Alexa mentioned, people are open to virtual companionship. And also, we don't want someone to sign on and not see anyone in their area. So we like that feature. But yeah, we've had great feedback. We love all feedback, and we're open to feedback. And we just are hoping to grow and improve and give everyone the dating app that they deserve and that they want to use.
I think the one challenge we've also run into, to be completely candid, is that, tech is always evolving. There are bugs and glitches, and there's no, error on the code. We don't know until somebody runs into that issue. And I think a lot of people forget what Bumble and Tinder and Hinge were like, or Facebook when they first launched. We have this is the baseline, and we have a pretty solid baseline, but we do deal with people who are frustrated that there's one minor bug or glitch and they get upset. And so we do the customer service and we troubleshoot. We're always open to troubleshooting and fixing the bugs. But we want to remind people that right now, this is the first version of the product. And in 5 years from now, it will be like a Bumble, Hinge, Tinder. Although they still have bugs. In 2016, Tinder deleted everyone's matches with an update. So it still happens. But that's the one thing that we've run into, that people get frustrated, and we're trying our best because we really do care.
Obviously you're doing this like a startup, right? So you're the co-founders, you're the customer service, the developers, the accounting, really absolutely everything to everyone. I can imagine that's overwhelming, but is that an overwhelmingly positive experience?
Yeah, it's really rewarding and overwhelming. And I think for me personally, the hardest part about doing this is doing it while chronically ill and disabled. I'm managing my health, I'm managing my symptoms, and I'm managing this business from all aspects. And so it can be really difficult to listen to my body and know when I need to stop. And yeah, it's hard doing it disabled.
I guess that's one of the benefits of working with family, right? It's not like those outside investors who just want the product done. It's people who know and understand what you're going through, which is brilliant. Now, if we were to fast forward 5 years, where would you want to see your app, Dateability?
We would love to be, comparable to Grindr. Grindr is the dating app for the LGBTQ community, and it has started with a personal story, and it blew up, and it was wildly successful. And we would just love to be the name for the main dating app for the disabled community. We want that brand recognition. We don't want anyone to wonder if there's a dating app out there for them. We want everyone to know about it.
Yeah, we're, currently looking for influencers in the disability and chronic illness world to help with a larger following, to help spread the word. I mean, I hear about most of things from Instagram. And we're, I think the one thing that we run into is that right now we're currently in the investment process and seeking investments. And a lot of people we talk to are able-bodied, and to try to convince them that this app is necessary is difficult because they don't understand. And so that's the one thing I think we've run into is just trying to say that the disability community wants this, they deserve this, and those naysayers, they don't know what it's like.
Jacqueline, Alexa, thank you so much for sharing the app with our audience. And for those who are just discovering Dateability, where can they find out more?
You can go to info.dateabilityapp.com to get some more information about the app. You can sign up via Apple App Store or Android or dateabilityapp.com. And you can follow us on social media channels. On Instagram, we are at dateabilityapp.
Wow, what a great app, and what a great reason, Steven, and so refreshing to see something new that really does fill a void.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I have to say, I think Alexa might be one of the most popular names in the world, so I don't know how she gets through life with that name. I really think that should have come up.
You think there's a lawsuit somewhere in there? You think someone can sue? You took my name and used it. That is all the time we have for today. Of course, check out Dateability, and of course, check out our social media. We'll post all the links there as well. On behalf of Jacqueline and Alexa, and of course, Steven, I am Marc Aflalo. We'll chat with you next week.
Thanks for watching Double Tap. Send us your feedback to feedback@doubletaponair.com. Leave us a voicemail at 1-877-803-4567. Hosted by Marc Aflalo in Montreal and Stephen Scott in Glasgow. Producer Marc Aflalo. Editing and graphics Jordan Steves. Voiceover Anna Vicino. Social media Wendy Kaufman. Integrated Described Video Specialist M. Williams. Supervising Producer Michelle Dudas. Manager Programming AMI TV Lizanne Gagne. Director Content Development and Production Karen Nye. VP Content Development and Operations John Melville. President and CEO David Arrington. Copyright 2023 Accessible Media Inc.
An AMI original production.